Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here, Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received, the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, most true, most authentic business voice. How do we do it? We bring people on who walk the walk. And today is no exception. I get to introduce, and I love saying this, former baseball player and submarine veteran, not to mention business coach and realtor and family man. And God, the intro would go on for days. And my friend, Nick Mershon. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you. Yeah, man. It's there's a long list. Everyone's like, "How old are you?" Like, look, we've done some stuff before.
Yeah, and
it's also
Nick is
learn.
a podcast host, and one of the very cool things, I am grateful to say that I was lucky enough to be invited to guest on Mershon Minutes, and wherever you get your pods, make certain that you were listening to Mershon Minutes, especially the one that I'm on. Not that that's gratuitous.
Shameless plug up front. The one with John's the best one because we got to do it twice.
And you can, and as Nick said earlier before we went live, anything worth doing is worth doing twice. And so there's a great example. But I love the fact, like I said again, that for you, so much in terms of this, your unbridled ability to be of service, your ability to be one of the more authentic people that I've ever encountered, and also so much wrapped into family. Tell me a little bit in regards to, like I said, you got a baseball dad, you're a baseball guy.
Sure.
What was that like, man?
Yeah. So that's where the opinion of others was thrown out at like, I don't know, 10 or 11, right? Because Dad played ball for the Reds for a year, and they figured out, hey, he can only hit a little. But the work ethic that you're going to be good at this thing, that, hey, here is something that I was great at that you're going to go be great at, was taught to me and all the brothers, and a bunch of them are still playing, right? So, but it was, you're going to put the work in, you're going to be good at what you do, and if you're going to be here, like, you're going to be going 110%. You're not just going to do this. You're not going to come in and half-ass anything.
Okay.
Right. So that was where the easier, like the more we did it, the easier it became. But it was also like everybody else is going on vacation, everybody else is doing X, Y, and Z, right? Like we're gonna go put the extra work in, we're gonna go do all the rest of it. So the initial sacrifice of your childhood or your whatever the normal family was, like, no, we're gonna go play baseball. And it's what all my little brothers still do.
Were you aware of that as a little kid?
No, not at all. All I knew
everyone's
was
going on vacation and we're not, and all that sort
right.
of
So it was more of like invited to go do X, Y, or Z with the friends, and we would have a tournament, or we would have something else, or I would have some other thing that I would have to go do. Which did I miss out on some things? Sure, if you want to call it missing out, but it also wouldn't have, like, I wouldn't have been as good. I wouldn't have gotten scholarships. I wouldn't have had all the opportunities I had on that end to play and do everything else that I did.
Yeah, and I would have to think that part of the fun would be this ability to be able to get to do things that a lot of other people don't get to do.
Of course.
You know, whether it's a little kid or whether in college. I mean, so if I got it right, it's Furman University in Florida Southern. Yep. Right. So you get to go into an elite field, whether of athletes, team, you get to travel and all that stuff, you know?
Right. And that was where because I was traveling 15, 16, 17, like I was on my own for a weekend playing baseball. Right. So the amount of opportunities I had, the people I got to meet, to be on the field with the Tigers at Florida Southern,
right,
none of that would have happened if Dad wouldn't have pushed me. And that was really one of the biggest moments in my life, right? My grandpa died in 04,
right,
05, somewhere in there, right? And so they were down here in Florida. He was on the Panhandle, right? But on the way back, Dad's like, hey, there's this trial. I got done playing ball, failed out of my second college. right? And Dad's like, there's this tryout over here for I don't even remember who it was for. I think it was a Rangers. It was somebody, right? And he's like, well, you're going to go to this tryout. I'm like, Dad, I didn't even bring my stuff. He's like, all your stuff's in the truck. I got you. I was like, awesome, right? So, um, I'm not doing so hot, right? Like Grandpa died. He was close to me.
Right.
And I roll up to this tryout. I'm like, here we go. Here we go again, right? If we got a shot, we got this shot. And as I'm standing in line, right, one of the scout that's running it was the guy that was recruiting me in South Carolina, right? So his name's Charles Aliano. He's still a scout. So shout out to Charles if he's listening. But he's like, Nick, why aren't you playing anywhere? I was like, oh, what's up, Charles? How you doing, man? I was like, Charles, I don't like going to class. So like I can still hit a baseball, I can still run and throw, we still do all the things. And he looks at me, he's like, I don't have it's like I don't have a he's like, all right, well, let's see what you got, right? So I go out there, I ran normal, right? I ran like a 6'6", 6'7". And then I think I threw twice. Everybody else throws 5, 6 times. I threw twice from right field. And he's like, Nick, you're good, come on. But that first at bat,
What it feel like?
because it's just the catcher calling it, right? It's just the catcher calling it. I've got it's 2-2, right? So I've got 2 balls, 2 strikes on me, and there's this borderline pitch. I don't know. I thought it was out from a lefty, right? And I look back at the catcher, and the catcher looks at me and he's like, all right, cool. Next pitch I hit, I don't know, 480, not 480, probably 425 to left center, right? So bomb, and I'm trotting around the bases. But in that moment, I was like, that was Grandpa, is what that was. Like I was like, I'm not. So fast forward to the end of that tryout. Charles is like, hey Nick, do you want to play here? He's like, my rookie ball team doesn't have any, but I can get you into this college. I was like, Charles, I don't think you can get me into this college, right? So that's how I got my shot at Florida Southern. Fast forward another 6 months, we're at Florida Southern. We get to step on the field with the Detroit Tigers. So got to play against Todd Jones, Joel Zamaya, Carlos Guillen, Pudge Rodriguez, right, when they had the 05-06 team, but 1 for 3 with a double.
This is in Florida, right?
It's all in Florida, right? So their rookie ball team or their spring training is right there in Lakeland.
It was Lakeland. So weird, weird stuff that
yeah.
I was going to guess Lakeland. Great.
Right. So Florida Southern plays them in a scrimmage game, right? Mm-hmm. But I get to go 1 for 3, so I get to live out my childhood dream of playing against major leaguers. I go 1 for 3 with a double and an RBI. None of that happens if Dad doesn't say, hey. Mm-mm. Like if my grandpa doesn't die, none of that happens, right? So and if Dad doesn't push me there, none of that happens. So that was at that time, highlight of my career, highlight of my life, because I got to be on the field with a bunch of major leaguers, and that was what I wanted to do as a kid. So it was awesome.
So it sounds like your dad, if I heard you correctly, it sounds like your dad is, while he pushes, doesn't sound like the hardened type. And I don't know if that's so or not. When you're like, oh, don't worry, I got you. I got like all that stuff. Did it feel like that it's not the great Santini, so to speak?
Or it does no? Now. At the time, it was right. Okay. At the time, it was because like we went back and forth on all sorts of stuff. Right. It was the usual father. Like I'm the oldest. He's trying to figure it out. He's being the best dad he can be. But no, he pushed hard. Okay. And I don't blame him for it at all. Like I hold nothing. Like there was no grudges there. We still have a great relationship. But looking back on it now, like it was exactly what I needed.
Okay.
So at no point was it detrimental. If that's if that was the question.
Yeah. What would you say are the best takeaways that you got from going through the baseball experience?
Yeah. So like you have no idea when that last time is going to happen, right? Especially like when it matters, right? Like you're going to go play in the men's league, you can do whatever else, but just the discipline of, hey, what do you actually want to do, right? Where are you going, and then what is the work that's going to take to get there? Like what are you going to have to give up to get there? Because people always make the goal sheet, right? Like, hey, here's what I'm going to go do, but they never make here's what I'm going to give up. Here's the price I'm willing to pay to get there. So it's not just hey, here's where I'm going. Like I sit down and make what are you willing to give up? What are the things that you would be okay missing to get to that next level? So really the discipline side of it, the ability to put your mind to something, and then it's just the confidence of stepping in the box, right? Like if you can't step in there and say, I am 1,000 times better than you, this ball's going off the scoreboard or this ball's going somewhere crazy, like you've already lost. Like don't even step in the box. It's the same in business. It's the same on the phones. It's the same in a relationship. Right? Like you're like, oh man, I hope this happens. You're already at a disadvantage.
So you're writing the steps down, as you're saying. You're literally like you're writing the work, the
100%.
process.
Absolutely. When I was, I don't know, I think I didn't know what I was doing at the time, right?
Yeah.
But I was 13 or 14, right? And I just made a little shoebox of all the things I wanted to accomplish by my senior year of high school and put it away and open it up 4 years later. Like I didn't know that I was manifesting. I didn't know that I was saying, hey, here's what I want to do. But I was doing all of the things that I've since learned about on like every step of the way.
Who planted that seed? You?
Oh, seed.
Meaning that I'm going to write all this down at 13.
Yeah, no. I don't, I don't, I don't know who initially planted that seed. It was like I was always reading, like, not always called self-help books, but I read like Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People
As a
when I was
kid?
super young. I read The Power of Positive Thinking when I was super. So I just read a bunch, and then I had the cars on the walls. I had the baseball stuff on the walls. Like I had the pictures up there before everybody vision boarded, but they were just like what I woke up to because you were whatever 12, 13, 14. I'm like, this is what I'm going to go do. Right. So I had it here in front of me all the time.
I love that. But you said something earlier talking about when you're talking to coaches, I don't think I can get in, or I don't like going to class, but it had very little to do with I don't want to learn, it sounds like.
Correct.
Right?
It was,
Okay.
right. Right. And that's like, figure out what you want to learn. I have this conversation with my 14-year-old brother, 15-year-old brother all the time. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I hate school. I was like, no, you don't, like, you hate what you're learning at school. Right. So I was super into like the stats, the baseball psychology, the how do I be better as a player? How do I learn about whatever the things where I was interested in? But if you're going to put me in a physics class and ask me how fast the ball's going 6 feet when I throw it off a 20-foot hill, like I don't care. I just care that the ball goes over the fence.
Did your
right?
family encourage you to keep thinking that way when you were younger? Or was there, I mean, because
So
that's not, I mean,
no. Okay. So yeah, so I was the experimental child, right? I'm the oldest of seven.
yeah.
We moved to South Carolina when I was 10, but I got homeschooled seventh, eighth, and ninth, right? So they held me back so I could play ball another year. So it was like there was structure, but it was also what else are you learning? What else are you? It was always what else are you learning, right? So obviously you have whatever you're reading, writing, math, your history, um, but the what else are you learning side of that was always prevalent, and like there was always something else. 'Cause we didn't have TV for the majority of my time growing up. So what else are you going to learn? What else are you going to go do? Hey, let's go play catch. Let's go hit.
Which is different than a lot of families. And the only question
100%.
I have for you is, do you remember getting or feeling any sort of pushback or resistance? You're the experimental. I'm the oldest of five. But I mean, I remember there was no thought or conversation of, will you be homeschooled? It was no, I'll be at St. Dominic.
Oh no, there was
for everyone
no.
else. You know what I mean? What was like?
Right,
Did you feel that sense of what the hell's going on?
a little, right? Because I'm like you've met me. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
So when they're like, "Hey, this is a thing," like there were a couple classes where I was out there, but it wasn't like it is now, where you've got giant co-op communities. You've got hordes of people that are homeschooling their kids, and they have their own little. Like we had a couple people, but we were the weirdos, right? Like this was
right.
This was like early '90s, or sorry, mid '90s. We're the weirdos, right?
Yeah.
So was there push? No, like did I want to go to school? Like I think if you asked dad, he would still say I got expelled. Right. But I went to school. I went back to high school because you couldn't be homeschooled and play high school sports in South Carolina at the time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's to me, I think you had said earlier, talking about that sense of worrying about what other people think went away at like 10 or 11, if I heard that right. It's like, that's the thing, because it's sometimes, if you're shielded in any way by, you know what I mean, a loving family, or whether it, you know, or whether it is a locked in mindset or those sorts of things, then it doesn't matter. But people, as growing up in Philadelphia, that never occurred to me. And I remember feeling a lot anyway. So like I said, I kind of like the fact in terms of this, that you were taking the road less traveled as a kid,
Correct.
And even if there was pushback, you're not really feeling it. And I think that therefore it's like, okay, so what's the problem? What the hell's the problem? Man, you are big. I'm shifting away from baseball, although as I said, I'm a baseball nut, but I really think one of the things I remember early in meeting you via LinkedIn, way past all this stuff, right, was that sense of how protective might not be the word I want, but it's the word's coming to me in regards to protective, in regards to vets and helping vets and bringing them along for your ride. And
Sure.
And then to see, like I said, you're a submarine vet. Okay, here's a terrible bonehead question, but I'll risk it. So I looked at your former baseball stats and you're 6'3", 190. How are you lumbering around in the sub?
Oh, it was I was probably, so I think I was 210 out of boot camp, and then I was probably 225 by the time I got to the boat. But it was,
I love that you
like,
call it boat.
you learned real quick. You learned real quick where you can be and where you can't be. But we had a couple guys on the boat, Marcus Johnson, Tim Hockfeld. Marcus was 6'8", Hockfeld was 6'10", or 6'6" and 6'10". They had to cut out like a hole in this guy's rack and put a ledge in so that he could sleep. Right. So, and I think there were like 2 spots on the boat where they could stand up, but I still think there should be a height limit on the submarine side, because the amount of head injuries that Doc treats, or the amount of just concussions, it was always fun when the little guys hit their heads. It was awful, because they're usually they're cruising around at a normal speed, right? Like we're all okay. I can't go, but like the little dudes are like, we're like, oh shit, like that's gonna be stitches. We need everything. Like we got blood everywhere. Come here. But you learned real quick, right? You learned real quick. Hey, I think in my first 3 months on board, not allowed to tell the story, right? But I set up a load line and ran my head into the steel beam, normal speed, blood everywhere, passed out, probably 6 or 8 stitches in the forehead. It's still up here. But that was 2 months in, 3 months in. So like you learn real quick what you can and can't do, or where you can and can't go.
How did you keep the mental game? I get, as you're explaining the physical part, like I was half kidding, but I saw one sub in my life at Pearl Harbor, right? So I remember my dad was a Navy guy, but when he was alive, he laughingly said he never saw a submarine. What was on a boat in San Diego, so he never felt danger. You know what I mean? But this is much more real. And I remember being on the sub before I knew you, and I'm like, I can't even fathom anybody at any height or any weight with the mental endurance to be able to be in spaces this tight. How were you able to mentally lock in the fact that you had no choice, but how did you do it?
For sure. Yeah. So you slept with 8 other dudes, right? So you had a normal, let's just call it a normal space, right? But you had triple bunk beds on every side of the wall and a wall that you walked in, right? And then we had 120 or so, 130, but they were either 130 your closest friends or 130 of your worst enemies. You found out quick which side you're on. They did a bunch of screening before you get down, but once we were down there, especially when new guys came on board, like we could probably tell within a week, hey, are you going to make it or not, right? And they wouldn't just fly guys out when we were on deployment, be like, hey, go, right? So when they were pretty strategic on when you brought new people on and how they made it or didn't make it. But we only had really one instance where we had somebody like lose their mind underway and had to like watch them for a little bit. But outside of that, it was, hey, you're going to be here in 2 weeks. Okay, here's the person that you're reporting to, but here's like everybody had a battle buddy. So you had like that first month, that person's job was to make sure that you knew who everybody was. You got through everything you're supposed to get through. Then they were a part of your department or your division too, every step of the way. So it was just like massive onboarding on, hey, do you have everything you need? How are your, like, do you have a spouse? Do you have kids? Whatever else. But you had somebody that had been on board for probably a year that knew their way around everything. That was like, okay, cool. Here are your next steps. Go. And that was before you even showed up.
Yeah, in business, they used to call it on-the-job training. So they made certain that you were not flying solo.
Correct. It was Right. It was like a mini apprenticeship program for that first anywhere 6 months to a year on board anyway, because everybody knew damage control, obviously, but you didn't know a whole lot about your job showing up. Right. So like you got through school, you got through your initial school in the Navy, but then you got to the boat and hey, here's how we actually do it. Right. So you had a bunch of qualifications that you get through every step of the way. So we were always learning, hey, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Every step of the way.
So what was the longest you were down?
So it was the reason that my podcast releases at 329 every time. It was not 329 days, but we call it the Chubb deployment because we would name our watch sections after old boats, right? And the Chubb was SS 329, but we were down for 130, I think, that on that one. And that was like the longest ever. Our next two were longer than that. So our next one was like 141. The one after that was like 150. But that was the first one that was the longer one. And one of the best crews I've ever been a part of. Right. So those guys on the Georgia Blue know who they are. But that was one where they said, hey, we're going to be back. Hey, we're going to be back by Halloween. Right. And I think we landed back in the States January 12th.
Yikes.
Right. So,
no Halloween, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no
right.
No
but it was all
and then off you were on January 12th, right? Yikes.
For sure. And our captain at the time was awesome. He came over and he's like, hey guys, here's what we're doing. We're doing some great stuff. We're going to be out here for a little bit, but usually there's like a workup for an inspection at the end. He's like, we're just going to clean. We're just going to work and we're just going to be here. He's like, so we're going to make this as fun as we possibly can in the situation that we're at. So like we were playing cards, we were learning, we were doing all sorts of stuff to just keep morale up. Right. Like I still have a picture. I'll see if I can find it. Of like, we decorated the missile tubes like they were like the mantle for Christmas, right? So like our team, our bunk room had like a family picture with Christmas hats on. Then we hung stockings for everybody. So is it like hard is the wrong word. It wasn't hard. It was just, are you in a spot where you can do the same thing every single day and be good at it, right? Because obviously some watches are better than others, just like some bats are better than others. But are you still doing it every day? Are you getting better? Because you're not showing up and you're like, oh, hey, go in the exact same spot. Okay, cool. It's the same thing. Like, no, you still have to get better every day. And for that 6 hours or 8 hours you're there, it's you and you got a bunch of guys asleep, hoping that you're doing your job properly. So
I would have to think you basically defined a blueprint for succeeding in business by just describing that.
Pretty much, right.
And that's the reason it matters to me so much, because the foundations to me are really important in regards to like creating legit foundations. I think one of the cool things about you is, like I said, that you are a worker, a hustler. Yeah. But I mean, I'd also say like a really consistent worker. And here's a couple of examples as to why. The baseball career, where that was, like I said, all of that. The service career. Why does it matter that you continue to bring other vets along for the ride with you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because my last 2 years, I was a career counselor. Yeah. Right. So it was helping guys get out. But my first month and a half out, like I didn't have a job. Right. Like I had to borrow money from the folks that second month, like just to float the mortgage to get everything else rolling. I was like, I don't know, like, because it's easy to advise people when you're in. You've never gone through it, right? You're like, oh, hey, do X, Y, and Z, do these things, do whatever it is. That's not a rip on any of the counselors that are in. So some of those are great people. They're doing the best they can, right? But once I saw, hey, like this is a real thing, this is a real issue. I just wanted to document my journey, right? So then that's where, and I still have to find the article. The article is out there somewhere. It was back when LinkedIn articles mattered. I wrote an article about the job search as a military guy, right? 6 months after I had the job. So I was like in a good spot, but I walked through like the mental stuff. I walked through 3 or 4 different steps on what I went through just on, hey, like your job is to get a job. Hey, your job also doesn't define you as a person. And that's another thing that people have a big issue with, right? Like, hey, am I making enough money? Like, you making $1 million? You making $10 million? You making $1 billion? Or you making $100 a day? It doesn't define who you are, right? So like, let's put that out there first. But for me, it was, hey, I'm in a spot now where I can at least teach those guys that are a year and a half from getting out, those guys that are 2 years from getting out, or those guys
Right.
that are, hey, I'm out in 3 months. What do I do? Start now. And I almost think there should be a career advisor on the way into the military on like, what are you trying to get out of it? Because nobody we talk about it on the way out, but nobody talks about, hey, what are you trying to get out of it on the way in?
Right.
Right. For me, it was like, I know you're going to pay for my school, and I know I'm going to learn some skill that's transferable to the real world. Right. So we had kid one on the way. I was like, well, bartending is cool, but I don't have like, a couple of my uncles were trying to give me money to not join. I was like, this is really cool. I would have money, but like, then what?
And then
That money's not giving me
and then
right. That money's not right, and then I'm
go.
still in the exact same spot. Correct.
Right.
Correct. Right. So wherever you're at. So now I just tell people, hey, are you learning or are you earning? Whatever job, and you should be doing both. Like if you can find a place where you can do both and they love it, go stick there and stay there.
Yeah. I think one of the things, and I love that you said that, something else like I'm learning later in life, which is, and I went through a long gap that I wish I had realized this, but I didn't, which is the simple, you talked about whether you're earning $1 million, $1 billion, 100, whatever. So I'll add one more thing that I think about too, which is the way that you earn the money, I feel like matters a whole lot less as it regards to prestige, so to speak. Sure. I remember going through I grew up in a blue collar family with 5 kids. And so it wasn't like we were any sort of a highbrow family, but once you, for my personally, get the taste of some success, for some reason, I felt very highbrow. And so like if there was a problem, you know what I mean, where I was bored with my job, I never thought, start a roofing company or whatever. And now I know people in my circle that are making money hand over fist because they're not foolish.
Correct.
I guess what I was going to ask you is, with the thought that I have is like you had 2 prior careers, and I'm including baseball as a career,
absolutely,
and the military, that were like sound so good, but you were one of the smart ones where you're writing down, and I'm guessing that continued as you were in the military. You know what I mean? What are you getting in? Yeah, and you say, of course, where most people are like, what? I guess the question is that it's like with so many people, like I see it now, knowing you, that I've interviewed, I remember at companies like former ball players. I've interviewed former military people, and I thought it was fascinating and had no idea why they would be capable of being in the job that I was interviewing for. Other than, this is cool. What I mean? Tell me about that home run. Tell me about the submarine.
Right.
But the qualifications, there was no bridge or link. You just identified the fact that you said an intro strategy and an exit strategy as you see it. When you started to realize that you have like this business, coaching mentality, right?
Sure.
With business acumen, what are some of the things that you were implementing in terms of helping yourself, hence the deal for you, as well as, you know what I mean, helping other people?
For sure. So for me, it was really simple, right? For me, it was, hey, like we're at 11, right? At 6. Like I was born in August. I was a Cubs baseball player my first Halloween, right? So like from birth, essentially, let's say, right? It was, hey, like I want to be on the field playing ball with the major leaguers, right? So cool. Like we checked that box. We didn't check the way that I thought we would check it, right? But we checked the box, right? So and then I do the same thing for businesses, right? Like, where are you now? Cool. What's the outcome we want, right? And there's always a gap. And it's either a knowledge gap, it's a skill gap, or it's an application gap, right? It's not, especially today.
Yeah.
Today, it's not a knowledge problem. It's you don't have that. You either don't have that skill set or you don't know it exists, right? So like just like in the workout world, eat less, eat better, move more, drink more water. Okay, cool, got it, right? But where are you now? Where are you going? What needs to happen between there? And then like, who are you learning from? Who are you learning from is always hugely important in this day of mass inundation. Like, pick 1 or 2. Learn from those people for 6 months. Learn what they did. Go and apply, because somebody's already done what you want to do. There's hundreds, I don't know about hundreds of thousands, but there's thousands of guys that have played Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. There's thousands of people that have done whatever business you want to be in. There's thousands of people that are wherever you want to be. And that's why like the vet thing is like was a huge part of what I was doing. Still a little smaller now, but the guys that have been out for 2 or 3 years are the guys that I can go advise.
Why?
Right? Because
Why
hey,
do they need 2 or 3 year gap?
because they've got they've got their first job out of the way, right? And everybody always talks
Yeah.
about your military transition, right, or whatever
Yeah.
your job transition
Right.
is. Like that never ends. It doesn't ever stop.
Mm-hmm.
You just got your first job out of the military. Congratulations.
Yeah.
The corporate world is not the military where you have to stay here for 20 years if you want to. Right, the majority of vets, I don't know what the number is. It's decreased here recently, which is good. But I think as I was getting out, is in that 70 to 80% of vets are in a different job after year one getting out. Right, so everybody treats it like, oh, hey, okay, cool, you got your job, you're good to go. And I'm like, are you pumped? Are you excited? Are you making the money you want to make? Right, and that's where just the mindset of I made 75 while I was in the military, cool, so I need to make 85 on the outside to be even. Throw all that out the window. What do you actually want to do?
Mm-hmm.
How much money do you want to make? What do you actually, how do you actually want to live? And that's where the networking side and just being around the right people is, like, for me, number one everywhere I go.
All right, so tell me, who inspired you early on?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I had 3 different recruiting firms working for me, and they all knew it, right? So Damon Grimes at Lucas Group, thank you for all of the work and effort that you did getting me placed in my first position. Mike Jennings worked, owns a recruiting firm, and Jordy Curran owned a recruiting firm. All 3 of them knew they were competing against me or competing for me, right? But
Right.
Jordy interviewed me 3 months later, just talking about my journey and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But so on the recruiting side, those 3 helped me. On the who was I looking up to, or who helped me out the most?
Or
Matt
God,
Rosebaugh.
in your mind,
Yeah. So
on the path.
Absolutely right. So Matt Rosebaugh up at Ohio State was a Tillman Fellow and
Right.
knew all about some just other things that existed. Right. And I sent him my resume. I think I was a year out when I sent him my resume. And he's like, all right, Nikki, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
I said, Matt, I've been yelling at my whole life. He's like, your resume's trash. I said, cool. What else? He's like, here's how you should structure it. Here's how you should do X, Y, and Z. I was like, awesome, cool. I'd never revamped my resume since I got out. Right. So he was one of the first people I met where, like, he introduced me to 7, 8 different people, and career took off exponentially.
So you just identified also the fact, in addition to awesome on your LinkedIn page, you also identified the fact that you are thick-skinned in the sense that, as you said, all right, fine, so what? All right, fine, so what?
Right.
I'll speak for me. I ain't identifying anybody else but myself. I still fight that. That sense of hurt feeling. Yeah. I still do. I mean, I get it. I like to think of myself as coachable, teachable, but that's impressive that you are like, hey, that's fine. Resume's trash. Great. What's next?
Right. Well, and was
that always you, or did that come?
Yes. Not always. Okay. So not always.
Right?
Like I was still the kid. Like I had to learn this freshman year at Furman, right? Because I would just get pissed after a strikeout, after the failing, and it didn't click that, hey, like the hold the emotion in, fine. Like I learned a lot freshman year at Furman just from a being coachable standpoint, because it was like it was Billy Badass in the baseball world, and hey, like I was good. I wasn't Billy Badass, but I was good freshman year at Furman, right? So moving that to everything else, like when we've got people, like I've got people that I've worked with now that are like, hey, are you open to feedback? I just, if I am screwing something up, just throw it at me. Like you don't need to ask that question ever again. Hey, Nick, here's what you did. Here's how I think you could approach this better. Here's X, Y, and Z. But that was always like, that was everywhere. That was in the baseball world. That was lifting. That was in the submarine force, right? Like the first thing they taught you was like, be open. Like if you didn't know why you were doing something, hey, here's what you were doing. And like we were correcting each other all the time on, hey, how do we get better? How do we get better? How do we get better? So that's where your level of improvement, once you hit that certain level, like you can't stop. You're like, we're good. I made it. One of my best baseball coaches that I ever played for, Steve Grant, still here in Greenville, South Carolina, said you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotten, right? So like,
give me the expression again. You're either green and growing.
Yeah, you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotten. So it was a don't get, essentially, like you're never too good.
I love this. I love this.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where it's like I came to this weird realization that it was like the moment I realized that I get to go further when I stop having that sort of, oh, you hurt my feelings.
Right.
It was like magical, you know. I'm not saying I like it, but the fact is, it's I think one of the things I see for you is you're a risk taker, and you've put yourself out there. That's the past stuff. The present stuff for me is even more interesting in the sense that you took a leap of faith professionally. You literally moved from your family to Miami to establish a coaching career with a major organization.
Absolutely.
But it's like,
sure.
literally, what was that like in your mind? I mean, look, you've got a great wife who's a wonderful artist and progressive artist, and I forget 437 kids, I think, if I remember correctly.
Only 8.
That's nuts.
We'll see if we get to 437, but yeah.
So you're gonna now pack up and split to help the family. What was that like, or establish the family, whatever?
Establishes establishes the right word, right? Because it wasn't like we've never been hurting, right? But it was it is the getting away from surviving into thriving. And I knew with that opportunity, like that was it. There was zero doubt in my mind, right? Like that was the first, not the first. It was the first time in a while where I'm 40 days. I was like 35, 40 days into the job, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Right. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Here it is. Here's this. I felt this resistance before. Cool. Like we need to lean into this. We need to go. Because on the other side of this is where it happens. Right. So that's but all of that was like, I don't make that jump in 2018, 2 years out of the Navy. Like I don't. There were 2 or 3 things along the way that had to happen before I was like, okay, cool. Like I have to bet on myself. I have to think bigger. I have to go do all the rest of this. Right. So, and that's why, like, I always share, it's a song by an EDM group here, but like that you've always been ready thing that I post on my story all the time. Like, if you're afraid or you're not sure, like that's the time to go. That's the time to go. And then I also started diving more into just the physiological side of like anxiety versus fear, right? And Dan Cook has a great skit on, or a great interview on this, where he's talking about like, are you scared or are you just so excited that you're about to effing win, and you just don't, and you want to yell at the top of the world, right? And I was like, Dane, this is awesome, go. But yeah, if you ever have the chance to, like, say that doesn't work out, right? I moved down here in 2021. Okay, cool. I can move back to North Carolina. I can go get the job making 75, 80, and we're going to be okay. Right. But like, that was the worst thing. So like, thank you Navy for operational risk analysis, and thank you college recruiting for, hey, where should you go? But I just like, and it's not a T chart at this point, but if you need to T chart it, hey, what's the best thing that happens? What's the worst thing that happens? Okay, cool. Like how, and then that's also, like you said it, I'm a risk taker.
Yeah.
Right? So what's your individual risk tolerance? If you don't know what that is yet, or you're a little more passive, then have somebody that's going to push you. Right. Just like if you're a risk taker like I am, have somebody that's going to ask a question or two that's in your circle on, hey, did we think this through? Did we think about X, Y, and Z? So you have an objective third party you can bounce stuff off of. And that's not with a decision, but just, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Have 1 or 2 people in your corner that you can ask that question to, and have them give you straight up feedback.
Yeah. I think you just define the differences between the sense of somebody that you know, a gentle nudge and a boot in the backside. Like, it's like,
right.
But I think what really resonates to me is that reminder. You're asking people in your core. You're not taking rando surveys and like, oh, hey, you know what I mean? This is the people that, you know, that you can trust, that you've developed trust with, or you've been through something with. And it's like, and I love that, because that's the part of the risk. You said about 30, 40 days in, you're unsure, you know, if this is working. What was it like when you realized it was so? When it was, oh, you know what? Like you said, the other side, What was
Yeah. Oh, the
what
other
was the other
side.
side
The
like?
other. I mean, the other side was
When'd you know?
great. Just great people, right? Like
Mhm.
I never. I walked into. It was the first time in a while where I walked into work every day and I was pumped to be there.
Okay.
Pumped to be there, right? So great people, great energy, around the right folks, learning from great people,
Mhm.
and it wasn't. Once again, it was still never you made it, but there were 12 of us, 13 of us,
Yeah.
and we were awesome, and still are, right? So
Mhm.
phenomenal people. I was like, cool. This is a great place to be for the time that I was there. But
Mhm.
it was people pushing you, it was people believing you, it
Right.
was, hey, here's a two or three places you can get
Mhm.
better, right? And
Mhm.
that's where, if and I think I talked about this on mine, right? But like I listened to two active listening courses, right? And that's as a major in communications
Mhm.
as an undergrad that I thought I'd never use. But
Mhm.
watched two active listening courses that changed the way I coach, changed the way I sell, changed the way I do everything.
Mhm.
Right. And then for those of you in relationships, it took me 7.5 years to ask, do you want me to solve it or do you want me to listen? So that's the other thing for those of you that are trying to figure out the relationship side of things and you're a solver like I am. Like I don't need you to solve it right now. I just wanted you to hear me. And I'm like, okay. I will put my hearing cap on or my listening cap on and not try and solve this
So,
because
brother,
it's
you
just where
said
the brain
seven and a
jumps
half
to.
years it took you. Did I hear that
Oh
right?
yeah,
7.5 years. So,
seven and a
go
half years.
and
7
drudge
years.
the first 7.5 years.
Yeah.
What was the realization that that was a tactic that would work for you? You changed,
Um,
you adapted, you changed, and that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
So I don't know if this was I think this might have been pre Chris Voss too. So a guy that wrote
yeah,
Never Split the Difference.
right.
I don't know who I heard that from, but I was
Mm,
like, oh, okay.
mm, mhm.
But like I've also tailored my TikTok and my Instagram to
Oh, and
be
your LinkedIn,
yeah. Well, I've tailored all that to be like beneficial to me. Right. So
hmm
like you can sit there and scroll on Instagram all day or
hmm
scroll on TikTok all day,
hmm
but I've learned more about taxes, relationships, sales, business on the social media platforms than I have at probably any institution outside of Tuck up at Dartmouth. Shout out to my next step people.
Oh, Northwestern
So
too, right? I mean, like I
yeah,
said,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Northwestern,
That
right? So,
was that data driven consulting course was
mhm.
phenomenal. People, hey, here's how like everybody has the data. How are you explaining it? Are you telling a story with it? Because if I just show you a graph,
Mhm.
cool, the chart's up and to the right. This is where you want to be, right? That yeah, you didn't tell me a story with it at all. So, and that's where my shout out to my roommate. He's got this deck of cards called like storytelling tactics.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I go over those with I go over those with the kids at night now. So like those are like, hey, get up there for 3 minutes, talk
Mhm.
about X, Y, and Z, and we just mini Toastmasters essentially, whatever
Mm,
they want to talk about.
mm. Give me, if you don't mind, give us the range of your kids in age.
16 to 2,
Got it.
and
Okay.
then essentially every 2 years, if you math okay
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I was starting to think of it right. I said it's nice. It's nice, easy math, and I think, and thank you for all of us for making your family divisible by two. Uh,
Always.
so you are, I think one of the things that one of the gifts that you have in regards to communications is the sense of brevity and clarity when you speak, when you post. You talked about tailoring your TikTok and your Instagram, and I yelled out, oh, and LinkedIn too.
Yep.
You speak very clearly and very briefly and get to the point, and some of those points are controversial. When did you
So,
realize, or was it just a case of the old do it for you? Is this, when did you realize that you could, and I'm going to say blur the lines in business, not in your
right.
opinion or life? When did
For
you
sure.
realize you could use your own personal authenticity to
Right.
affect how
Let's
interact?
yeah. So no, we're gonna go to I was 13 or 14. I was younger.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
but there was a uh, so we're Catholic, right? We moved down to the Bible Belt. There was
Right.
some Pentecostal church that was doing it wasn't a bashing of the Catholic Church, but it was
Mm-hmm.
essentially a, hey, here's X, Y, and Z, right? So they were like me, dad, a couple of dad's friends at the time,
Mm-hmm.
like just went and infiltrated this thing, right? So like this thing ends. And then we're like having conversations with, I'm like 14 years old, having like theological conversations with these people about the church and X, Y, and Z. So learned how to present your side of the story logically,
Mm-hmm.
with the backing, with some research, with the things, right? And all I did was translate that into, hey, LinkedIn, I see that you're not allowing us to have a couple different conversations as we were in 2020, right?
Right.
And I was livid. They kicked me off LinkedIn at like 7,000 followers, right? But like I knew what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
When they Thanos, I had a post that got 27,000, 30,000 views back when they had the view count, and it had
Yeah.
probably a thread, a very respectful thread of like different sides of COVID lockdowns. Right, that
Right.
was very professional on both sides. Yeah, nobody was
Mm-hmm.
screaming, nobody was doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And all I did was present data and appealed it again, and then tried to log back in. 2 days later, my account was gone.
Mm-hmm.
But that was as I saw just the lack of logic essentially
Mm-hmm.
inside of what everything was doing. I was like, okay, cool. Like, where can I push the boundary? Where can I push the boundary?
Yeah.
And then just being the risk taker. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? Okay, so I don't have LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I probably got 4 hours of my life back weekly after
Oh
that for
my
a
God, I
little
was gonna
bit.
say daily sometimes. Yeah,
Right.
right.
But a that was like a seventh or an eighth grade logic class,
Mm-hmm.
just on how to present opinions, and then a couple of different debate things through high school,
Yeah.
on how to actually have discourse and a conversation
Mm-hmm.
versus a screaming match where, John, you're on this side, I'm on this side, so we obviously can't have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Or
the Venn
friendship,
diagrams, right,
right? Or
um,
friendship or relationship, right?
right,
Yeah. I think
and
one of the things that I was impressed by you then, 2020, especially then, because I was
yeah,
on the opposite side of a lot of things.
100%,
And I think the sense you just talked about, the sense, like referencing the book Don't Split the Difference, but you also, the adaptability to me is a big deal. I feel like one of the things that, as I've grown over the last, we'll even say 3 years, right,
sure,
that my opinions have remained really close to the same. However,
for
what I've
sure,
also come to realize is that there's several people in my circle that I realized, took me a minute, but like realized that sense of that it's like I would be far better off, and I'm not compromising when you're just allowing someone to express their beliefs. I just
right,
interviewed somebody recently, and I remember we went through, like, it was like high school. You're talking 13, 14. I'm acting it where it's like, oh, block and this and yeah and yeah, and it's like, all right, first off, I wasn't that popular in high school. I don't need to relive that. But,
right,
it's like, but that's sort of absolutist. And one of the
yeah,
things that, in terms from a communication side, and I would imagine, whether it is, through valuetainment, whether it is through the ability to be a realtor, whether it's your ability to raise a family up, and sustain a marriage and relationships and grow, is that there's a sense of being able to, as you said, the discourse without the screaming and hollering,
right,
like that,
right.
Um,
Absolutely. I'm sure my older two are going to listen to this and be like, Dad, not screaming. What are you talking about? But it's
yeah, can we have them on?
we all
Because I
still
don't
have
know.
our moments. But no,
Well,
that's
first off, you're
like,
a parent. You're a parent. And I was going to
of
ask you
course,
of that. So you have very strong opinions, and you've come from a family where it was, as the coach, so to speak, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. What do you like raising the kids, especially from a distance, even if it's part
yeah,
of the week? What is it
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
for you in
So
terms,
yeah, so for me, it's very much a like I don't I want them to be the best versions of them, and there's
right?
no like I'm not gonna am I going to stretch them and push them into different areas where they're uncomfortable? Yes,
Okay.
100%. But it's also from a standpoint of me pushing you down the road to ride the bike the first time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we're going to let you be dangerous enough to hurt yourself, and then like learn the lesson from whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that help on a FaceTime or a like? Have I parented through the phone before? Yes, absolutely, because you have to.
Well, it's
just being where I'm at.
2023, so yeah.
But it's very much, hey, when I'm home, and when I'm gone, it's like I'm working,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but they also understand, like before I moved down here, they like we still have a board on the wall of what we're going to accomplish as a family,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
people do the individual goals all the time, but usually you're either not on the same page or the kids are like, hey, what's going on, right? But we sat down and was like, hey, here's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be around for 2 or 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
or hey, we're going to be apart for a little bit, but here's what we're driving towards. Here's why.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help the 5-year-old on a normal day? No, not at all. Does that help the 2-year-old? No, not at all. But like my middle kids are really the ones that are the most impacted by this because they were little, and dad was getting out of the Navy. And all they knew was, hey, dad's been home, dad's been doing X, Y, and Z, and now he's gone. Right. So like those are the and not that I don't try with all of them, but those are the relationships that I pour into a little bit more when I'm home, just so that they know, hey, like this is not a forever thing. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
I think the vision part is huge. I just was thinking about that. It's like, for me, I remember like when I was a boss with a company and all that stuff. One of the things that I wish I did more
Yeah.
was make certain that every conversation had a vision part of the conversation.
Sure.
You know, and I think that whether it's parenting or for you, the business coaching, or whatever you're guiding, I think that's terribly important to explain the why, the larger picture.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, and that was, thank you, Submarine Force, right? Because that was
Right.
day one. They're like, we don't care if you're the brand new guy or if you've been here 5 years, right? If you don't know why you're not doing something, or you see something that you think's wrong, like raise your hand the right way, and ask, because like maybe we're missing it, right? But we had a guy that was on the boat 2 weeks, phone talker when we were moving torpedoes, right? That
Yeah.
stopped the whole evolution and saved us probably 3 days of pain because the crane got hooked on something. He's like stop, right? Like, we're like, oh, well, hey, thanks so much. And he, like, I think he got an award for it, like being there 2 weeks, right? Because we were like, this is what we're breeding every step of the way. So that's where, and this is not saying like go be disrespectful to your parents, right? But like I tell my kids all the time, and I think I may have said it once, right? But if I ever say because I said so, that's not a reason. Like ask me that question, right? And they're not jerks about it, but I've put that out at the house all the time. Ask the question, why are we doing this, Dad? Okay, cool.
How long
good,
did it
good
take
question.
you and your wife to come to this agreement that it was like, this is going to be cool, to building this plan? What was that an easy, or you know?
No. And that's the, like, I get that question a bunch, right? Like, oh, what was the plan? Like, well, there wasn't one, everybody.
Yeah.
But it's, we work well together. We complement each other. But do you have somebody that understands, like, one, I don't want to say why we're here, but understands that like raising kids can be cool, right? And then the other side of that is like, what are we driving towards, right? So like, don't stop dating the people. Like once you have the person, like that's not the end of it. That's the beginning of it, right? So if we're gonna Disney Disney movie it, right? Like it's not a happily ever after. It's, hey, now this is starting.
Got it.
Okay, cool. What's next? What's next? But it's also the like, are you growing together? Because you're either growing together or you're growing further apart. There's no in between there. We're not just maintaining again. So the more you stay with common vision, what are your goals? What are her goals? Or what are his goals? Okay, cool. Are those together? Figure it out and go.
I find that it's amazing to me to draw back on when you were a little kid to that moment right there when you were talking about what are the goals, what are the plans. You know, it's plans can change. Obviously, they get revised. You know, and the submarine example is perfect. That there's nothing militant here, but to think, Nick, that you've been able to live your life, create a business model, build a family, all of it around the most basic elements of planning, vision, consistency, continued effort. And they sound so far removed sometimes in terms of, oh my God, or it sounds, oh my God, I know. And then people don't do it, you know?
Right.
Me,
And
when
that's
a lot of it, you know what I'm saying? So I'm
right.
only speaking for me. it's
Correct.
amazing. One of the reasons I wanted you on, and I'll acknowledge you right now, which is this, aside from the fact that you've taught me a ton from afar. I think I shared with you on the podcast and in conversation, you making a call to me one time in terms of when I was running, and pushing me, and it was gross. And I remember not the call, the running part, you know what I mean? And it was like, and you pushed me through, encouraging. And this is where it's really important that I get to say to you how much I admire you. And it's not just people's beliefs systems. I've become really convinced now that individual belief systems are theirs. I think if you're coming from a place of service, if you're coming from a place of helping people out, I think it's really important to not act all high school and, no, yeah. And the whole point of authenticity, where it comes from for me, is that I can keep evolving and growing. And Nick, it's honest to God, you're one of those people that helped me a ton along the way. Before I wrap, what's the best way that we could find you? I know your social media profiles, and they will be on the podcast.
Perfect.
So you don't have to spell them out.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So if those are going to be at the bottom of this, just text me, everybody. It's 305-564-1664. If I can help you at all, shoot that over there, and I will be of service as much as I can, because it's not just, especially with that run, right? Like, you didn't need the kick in the ass there, right? You needed the I'm going to go talk to the girl or guy the first time at the bar, and you just needed like the two fingers behind you to get you going in the right direction. Right? You needed the nudge to be like, this is the direction, right? So if you like, I don't care.
Really hard if it was girl,
right? But yeah, if anybody needs, if you're going through some stuff, or you just need the motivation of the day, shoot me, and I'll get back to you.
Good man. As the Nick Mershon, I thank you. I acknowledge you. I'm really grateful that you were here, man. And the do it for you part, I love. And massive problem solver. This was handled right before the call. But in all seriousness, you're a hell of a good guy, man. Would you come back?
Absolutely, John. Thanks so much for having me.
100%. Folks, you just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Keep liking, following, sharing, telling your folks. And we'll keep driving content through your front door. John Duffin from Duffin Media here. Have a great day, folks. Be well. Bye-bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.